Global Journalism Seminars. This is The Briefing. In 2022, 11 journalists were killed in Mexico, making it the deadliest country in the world to report the news from. It was the deadliest year on record for Mexican journalists, who accounted for 20% of the 57 reporters killed, an 18.8% increase from 2021. Haiti, Nicaragua, and Brazil are among the riskiest countries for investigating issues relating to organized crime, gangs, and corruption. We polled 13 of our journalist fellows to ask if they had ever been physically threatened in the line of work. 54% said they had. 77% had been threatened or harassed online. In this seminar, we'll be talking to Marcela Turati Muñoz about lessons in resilience from her home state, Mexico. That's the briefing. Let's begin.
Well, hello, and a very, very warm welcome to everyone who's joined in for this Global Journalism Seminar Series. I'm Mitali Mukherjee, I'm Director of Programs at Reuters, and today we're discussing the use of violence to silence journalists and the impact of that kind of violent action on reporting, the impact on journalists who cover it, and perhaps how to prepare yourself for that kind of environment. Very, very happy to welcome and introduce a pioneer in this field, Marcela Turati Muñoz. She's an award-winning investigative journalist. She's the author and co-founder of the Mexican investigative journalism nonprofit organization called Quinto Elemento Labs, and a website as well called Where Did the Disappeared Go? Marcela has, of course, been renowned for all her investigative work into missing people, enforced disappearances, massacres of migrants, mass graves, not the ordinary end of journalism, you would say, and perhaps the very, very difficult impact for herself of reporting on all this. Marcela, first and foremost, thank you for joining in, and a very warm welcome to you from all of us here at Reuters. One gets the sense of how it's a difficult terrain, but perhaps one doesn't understand it in its entirety. Let me start by asking you to walk our audience through what the landscape for journalists in Mexico looks like at this point.
Yes, first of all, thanks for the invitation, and good day to all the colleagues who are present watching this interview. The landscape in Mexico is like really difficult. We have last year, I think one of the worst years for journalists, because we had like 12 journalists disappear. No, sorry, 12 journalists killed. And we have a lot of emergencies all the year, because every year, every moment, we have these calls of colleagues telling that they are on risk. At the same time, with the COVID, with the pandemic, many newsrooms close, and they just close, or others cut the salaries of the journalists who works there. And at the same time, we have like a government, a federal government, that is really bullying all the time to the press, and accusing the press to be like the enemy of the people and the enemy of the transformation of this government, that because the critics and all the investigations. So this has been like really difficult period and difficult moment for the Mexican press.
Absolutely. And of course, there are multiple points of threat, but let's, sort of dwell on the political climate for a little bit, Marcela. How much did that change the environment for journalists? Is it a far more overt situation of state pushback right now? How has it been?
Okay. Always, since 2006, we have in Mexico what we call the war on drugs, that the president declared against the drug cartels. That was the beginning in all the country for this violence that we have been living since then. We have now more than 15 years with this kind of violence. So we have, for once, also the drug cartels violence. And in the other side, we have now, since 2018, with this new government, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, he has a program daily to communicate to the people what he thinks about life and the news in the government. So it is a TV program daily in weekdays. And he has a section every Wednesday to show who are the liars, he said, who are the journalists who lie. And so he chose and he exhibit everything that he didn't like, he doesn't like. So there is a big problem because all the time is like accusing the press to be enemies. And I think in his followers, this has been like, it has had impact on the environment, no? But at the same time, we have all the other type of crime, the organized crime, and even the people in the government who are mayors or sometimes police who are killing journalists. And so this is not helping for the democracy.
Yes, and to be clear, Marcela, this is not, this televised address is not a press conference, it's an address where there's only one person speaking. And I imagine the liars are journalists who are perhaps critical of the establishment or critical of anything the establishment might have done.
Yes, there are the criticals, and also there is a new kind of journalists who appear on these conferences, or we say conferences, and to play the opposite role, that is claiming and, I don't know, praising him and telling him that he's the hero, and also speaking against the journalists who do their jobs, so who do their work. So it's really difficult. But in the past governments, we have other kind of threats against journalists. We have Pegasus, the spyware. The last government used Pegasus to spy on many cell phones of journalists, and we discovered it like in 2017 that many journalists who were investigating the president and doing another kind of investigations, they spy on them. And now we know that some journalists who now are exiled outside Mexico, they were threatened by this security minister that now is on trial in the United States. So it's like because he worked with the drug cartels. So it has been like a really dark moment for the Mexican press since the last years. Yes.
And one of those Pegasus victims was you yourself, Marcela. And, I'll come to that in a little bit. But there were two comments from you in other interviews that really struck me. One, the point that you just made, where you said that the violence emanates not just from the cartels, everyone is involved. Criminal groups, authorities, security forces, and it's a parade of dark actors almost. And the second point that you made in another conversation, where you said it's not a war situation, but it is a war-like situation for journalists, almost on a permanent basis. would you say from the years that you have been a journalist, this is perhaps the lowest point for journalists across Mexico and the pushback that they're facing?
Yes, before I was like a normal journalist. I cover poverty. I don't know. I go to take. Yes, I publish about conferences, press conferences in Mexico City, publishing about indigenous movements and healthcare, things like that. Since 2008, my life changed with this war on drugs. And I start covering massacres. I have to organize with another colleagues what we call periodistas de a pie, journalists on foot or grassroots journalists, to provide some kind of support to journalists who were on risk, to train journalists or ask to the Colombian journalists or to the United Nations or to provide us some training to cover this, because we didn't know how we have to what we have to do. And in all these years, I have been covering what we call the victims of violence. That has been my role since 2008, the victims of violence and interviewing and everything. We have discovered that the half of the threats against journalists come from the same authorities. No, the authorities are the ones who threat sometimes more than organized crime, or this is like a corruption. They work together, and the threats against journalists come from the authorities. So this is like really difficult to digest, to think. And also in all these years, it has been a high impact, emotional and psychological, I think, impact, because covering this so many years, it has an impact, an effect, I think, in the life of many of us journalists who cover this undeclared war. No, so that's the situation.
It does, and it is incredibly brave of you to carry on through with this. And it's come with collateral damage, hasn't it, Marcela? I mean, for one, the Pegasus investigation revealed that yours was one of the phones being tapped. And I think 2 years back, there was another revelation that the state itself was tracking you with some kind of geo-tracking devices and 2 or 3 other people, and almost came up with this investigation and this allegation that you somehow were involved.
Yes, I always thought that when the people ask me like, are you on risk? And I always answer, no, I cover victims of violence. I don't cover drug cartels. So the people or my colleagues who are covering corruption or the drug cartels, I always thought that they were in danger always. But what I understood is that covering victims and being with the parents of with children disappear, who are looking for mass graves and going to the morgue to see if their son or is there, and they are excavating in different parts of Mexico and searching these mass graves. This is really dangerous. Cover this, because the government want always to invisibilize and to hide these so many victims and so many dead bodies. in Mexico. So for my investigations, I was investigating in the north, close to Texas, a mass grave with more than 200 bodies. And I discovered that the government have identified some of these corpses, and they didn't say or call to the family to inform them that their sons, their children were in these mass graves. So publishing that was for the government was that they say that I violate like secrecy laws, and I am under investigation, and they invented that I am in a group of organized crime, and they put me open a file against me, against forensic anthropology, and against a lawyer, that we were investigating these mass graves. So with this excuse, they could track our cellular phones. They could know, check all our calls and know where I was, who my sources were, and I don't know, they ask information, really personal, really private information about me. And that same year, I also has Pegasus, or I am on the list of Pegasus spy journalists, and I was investigating the 43 student disappear. It's another case. So now I know, and I am still in this investigation, under this investigation. Now I know that covering victims, investigating about the victims or the parents, the information that the parents of the disappeared people provide is really dangerous for the government. So yes, I am paying these consequences.
Let's talk for a little bit about Quinto Elemento Lab, something that you created, because the phenomenon of disappearances is perhaps something that has echoes across South Asia for journalists there. It certainly has echoes across the African continent, where disappearances happen fairly frequently. What do you think has been the most important role that Quinto has played, and how do you think journalists could actually look at this model and look to bring something like that within their own communities?
Before Quinto Elemento, I founded Periodistas de a Pie, this kind of grassroots to protect journalists and to give training in all Mexico to some collectives of journalists about how to stay safe, no? And then some of these groups create their own collectives to protect other journalists. And then in 2016, I co-founded with another colleagues Quinto Elemento Lab. We were thinking, and we noticed that many journalists stopped doing investigations, and that we have many things against us to investigate. Lack of money, we don't have editors, the quality is not always good, or you don't have enough contacts to publish your investigation in important medias, magazine or TV. So we come together, we were 4 journalists, and we thought that we could create this lab to investigate ourselves, what we think is important for the public to know, and also help journalists from the difficult places, these silence regions, to investigate. So we help. This is one of we accompany the journalists to do their investigations, and at the same time we help also if they need, for example, FOIA or transparency, more skills. We have somebody who can help them, or databases, or so we use, I don't know, we use our own talents, skills to put together with these journalists. We in my field we have investigate. For example, we create the first national mass graves map in Mexico. The government didn't have. We created the 2000 clandestine mass graves found in Mexico. We also did the first register of unidentified but corpses who are that the government have. We have the first database of 39,000 of these corpses that the government have in the morgues. We have investigate about the disappeared who are alive, who are slaves on by the drug cartels. And I don't know, we always are thinking what we can do new that is important for the people to know, and in my case, for the relatives of these missing people, what information they need. So for that investigations, we have those investigations have been really, really important. Also, we have one of how Mexico became. We have 100,000 people disappear now, and we could create an interactive map to see where are disappearing, the age, the sex, the gender, and different layers that you can check about this.
Did I catch that figure right? Did you say 100,000 missing?
Yes, 100,000. Now it's 115,000 people missing since from 2006 until now.
You also wrote what I think is an incredibly sort of nuanced piece about how to interview victims of tragedy, witnesses, survivors. For those of you interested, I would encourage you to look for it online. And you've detailed many points there, Marcela, but for our journalist community and for those listening, walk us through what you keep in mind when you're having these extremely difficult and extremely fragile conversations.
The first thing that I always suggest, and I try to practice, is that understand or think, imagine that you are the one you are investigating, interviewing, sorry. For example, that maybe this man that you have to interview is your uncle, or I don't know, this girl is your niece. So you have to place or put in their shoes, no? Think how you will ask or how you will formulate questions if these people were your relatives, no? So you have to have the same sensitivity as you have with and the same care as you have with your family, no? That is one of the things. And also, you don't have to re-victimize these people with your question or with your publication. And the other thing that is really, really important, and most in Mexico and places like Mexico, is that you have to think, and also you have to advise or talk with the people and think if this is dangerous for them. And if it is dangerous, maybe you don't have to publish. You have to say, to look another paths, another ways. Even if you have the interview done, if this will be, you have to ask yourself and explain to the people what danger they will face if you publish. Maybe it's a boycott of your own work, but you are responsible of the safety of the people and even of your own safety. So this is like a filter, the safety. You have to take care. Everything you have to care about these people.
Let me ask you a more difficult question, perhaps, Marcela. You know, some of what comes off from our fellows in conversations about violence against journalists is that it's sort of feeding off from the community itself. And sometimes when things reach a tipping point, it almost normalizes what should not be normalized. You know, what's your sense of how the broader population in your country is perceiving all this? There's sort of this glamorization of drug cartels with the soap operas and the TV series. There are intensely violent videos now amongst the drug cartels, beheading, cannibalization. You know, it's really sort of taking it to break point. What is your sense of how the broader polity views the importance of what journalists like you are doing?
Again, sorry, the last question is it got...
How do you think the broader population is supporting journalists like you? Are they supporting journalists like you enough?
No, it's really sad. I don't know. I have 5 of the journalists who are killed. I think I met, or they were my friends. And every year we are protesting, and we are, I don't know, organizing memorials or organizing manifestations for journalists, the new journalists killed. And we noticed that we are always alone. We are only journalists, and few journalists protesting or commemorating. Even sometimes the owners of the media companies, they are not present even in the burials, even in the funerals. They are not present, and we are always like thinking what happened. So I think the people normalize that the journalists must be killed, or I don't know. There are many people is dying, are dying, and I think the people think, the common people think that, okay, but many people is dying, there are dying, police, politicians are killed, different people, lawyers, sometimes lawyers, so it's normal that journalists are killed also in this war. And that is the problem, the normalization. And we always try to speak to explain to the people that killing journalists is a really bad signal for everybody, because you are killing the people who are giving you the information to survive. They're giving you the information about the cartels, about the corruption. So silencing journalists, you are the whole region. If you kill a journalist, the whole region will be silenced, and nobody will speak, and you will lose the news about what is happening in your community. But it's, I don't know, I think that the people, we have many years on this, that our message, I don't know, is not, our message, it seems that it has not destinatory, and and we are the same, still the same people. But now we are trying to change and to maybe don't ask the people support us. Maybe it's better. We are thinking it's better explain what we do, what a journalist do, what is a critic journalist, and why this is important for normal life, for the life of all the people, for Mexico. And so we have to change our strategies and, I don't know, be closer to the community and explain and yes, what is our role in this.
A final question from me before I open up to the broader audience and questions, Marcela. It's almost a load times two for you. You know, one is the threat that you face from violent aggression, either from the state or from some of these cartels or indeed other parties. And the second is the very real load of the work that you're documenting, mass burials, missing people. It's easy for me to ask, how do you protect your mental health? But it's an important question. How do you do that? And how do you provide emotional support for your family and your well-wishers who are perhaps rightly so very concerned for you?
Yeah, that is a huge question. I think I had a moment of burnout some years ago, and I could not read, listen news or interview people. I could not finish any article. I was really blocked out, really bad and angry, and I don't know, with the emotional explosions. Later, I understood that I had these PTSD symptoms. And what I have been done is creating communities, like communities of journalists to support one to each other. We now also we teach about digital security, about physical security, and we also incorporate the psycho-emotional security, safety, and some tips. So with my groups or the teams that I am leading in investigating something, sometimes we do require therapy as a requirement, and therapy in group for the most difficult investigations, spaces where we can talk what we are feeling, and also we have many trainings about this, and this is important. I create like a workshop that is called how to interview victims, or how to cover the grief and what to do with my own grief. This is the second part of this workshop, and it's about how to recognize when something is bad and sometimes change topics, change routines. I'll also think that you must take care of yourself, because this is a political decision, because you want to survive this and you want to be many years covering this. So you have to be fine. You have to take care of yourself. You have to be sustainable. I don't know. And so it's changing routines, is also sometimes spiritual rites. We also sometimes in our workshops, we do things like spirituals or with shamans, or one day with a priest, or with people with meditation, and that to explore what we do, if we have some fears, if we have some things that we feel that we did wrong, everything, and work with this, but also, I don't know, say, I am sorry I did this, but I can continue doing journalism, because working with victims, you always feeling bad that you maybe somebody was crying when you interview, or that maybe you put somebody on risk. So you have to constantly to explore what you did, but you can get paralyzed, feeling, blaming yourself that you did something wrong. So now we try to work with these emotions to continue and to forgive yourself and to ask forgiveness to the people that maybe you did something, but continue being journalists. So now the emotional, or this checklist emotional on all these practices are really important, but I really think that working together in a community is really important, not alone, with a community of journalists who understand you. You can be better, and you can trespass all these kind of impacts.
That's an incredibly brave and vulnerable answer, and an honest answer. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to open up the conversation now to our fellows who are at the Reuters Institute in Oxford. My first two respondents, just to introduce them to you, Marcela, are Radhesham Jadhav from India and Regine Cabato from the Philippines, both of whom have lived experiences similar to yours. Radhesham has documented farmer suicides across a large part of India, Western India, and Regine has written quite extensively on the troll farms in the Philippines, because of which she herself was a target of a lot of that pushback and hate. Radhesham, shall we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mithali. So I'll talk about sexual and gender-based violence. And because I'm working on climate change, I would try to relate this to the climate change and sexual and gender-based violence. The way female bodies are incorporated in labor changes with climate change. I'll give an example. So I come from the region where parts of my state face perennial droughts, and in last few years there are unseasonal showers. So with no option left, people migrate. People migrate to the sugar bowl of India, and there are around 1 million people who migrate every year. It's a seasonal migration, and half of them are women. So when they migrate to sugar bowl of India for sugarcane cutting, the amount of violence and exploitation they faced has multiplied. So I'll give an example. We can correlate. In last few years, number of child marriages have multiplied. And why this is happening? Because when a sugar contractor signs a contract with a laborer, he signs contract as a unit. So you need husband and wife to sign the contract. So once you are married, you and your wife are one unit, and then you migrate for sugarcane cutting. After, I'm deliberately using the word producing, after producing number of sons, then these women are asked to go for hysterectomy surgeries. And why hysterectomy surgeries? Because then you don't have menstrual cycles. Because menstrual cycles create hurdle in work, because you have to take huge amount of sugarcane on your head and load it into trolleys. So once you produce children, go for hysterectomy surgeries, and then your body is incorporated into a labor, it's converted into a machine of a kind. And what I'm telling is just a tip of iceberg. There are many other exploitations these women sugarcane cutters are facing. So there are two kinds of reaction. When you report this, there's a clear denial. Nothing of this kind isn't happening. And then second is, of course, you face pressure from your community. As Marcela said, there's no much support from your community, from journalist community. And also, there is no support from a political system as such, because political system definitely want to hide this, because these women don't have any reporting mechanism what is happening to them, what is happening to their children. So this is something which I wanted to share with you.
Thank you, Radhisham. Shall we move to Regine?
Hello. Thank you so much for sharing, Marcela. I think the Philippines and Mexico have a lot in common. Our countries are never too far from each other on the list of deadliest countries for journalists. We also share a lot, I think, in terms of crime issues, cultural background, and most recently, the war on drugs. So that's also been quite a shock for journalists in the Philippines to cover. I've been on the receiving end of a few harassment campaigns in the past couple of government administrations, and I wanted to ask you about your own, like Mexican journalists' own experiences of online harassment. Specifically, the question that I have is what the relationship between online and offline violence is. When is something likely to cross over? In the Philippines, for example, usually once an activist or sometimes journalists or even people in the civil sector are accused of being communists online, sometimes it will carry over into real life violence. So I'm wondering how it is in your context. Are killings for journalists usually preceded by threats? And if I could throw in a quick second question, since you mentioned that the drug war in Mexico started in 2006, ours was in 2016. So it's been like 10 years since, and obviously this kind of policy and the violence it creates, the culture of violence it creates, the culture of impunity, it's not unprecedented for us. So coming from the context of Mexico, what warning, I guess, would you have for a country like the Philippines, which has faced this for just one presidential term, but where the damage to the cultural psyche is likely to carry on for several more years? What would you advise to us journalists?
Yes. First, yes, I think Philippines is like really similar to Mexico, and it's different because the government is doing these extrajudicial executions, no? And this war is like really evident, the government there, no? In the executions. The first question about the online harassment and the offline, in the pandemic, I think there were the years that we, or the journalists, many journalists received more and more threats in social network. But since before, we see, sometimes we can notice that there are some threats in the online that they have a lot of information of you, no? Like sometimes you can perceive that there is people that is not only insulting you, telling whatever that they think, but they have information about you. And so in those cases, it can be that they are spying, or they are really investigating you, and you have to be aware because the language, or sometimes they elaborate better these threats. I remember that one friend, she's in data, analyzing data always in the social network. She received some threats, but really well elaborated. They were telling her that they will burn her, and the picture, they put some pictures of flesh in an oven, no, the past parts of the corpse in an oven, or everything burning, that we were really feeling that it was that this trespass, the harassment, normal harassment. So you have to see, because the online harassment, the people can threat you and insult you because they are in the anonymity, and they can do it really easy and low cost. But when you know that this is not easy, the picture or what they are telling you about yourself is more accurate about what you do or where do you live, yes, you have to think that this can be another kind of harassment, and that you have to be worried and you have to protect yourself. No, and what warning or what advice I can give you to the Philippines press journalists? I don't know. I always my advice is always work together. It's not time to work alone. It's not time to work by yourself in looking for the scoop. You have to create networks. It's like it's another kind of job. Maybe you have to invest many hours of your life organizing the community of journalists, but you have to protect all together. You have to protect your colleagues, learn how to do it well, how to investigate better, how to prove what the government is doing, and also explaining to the community why it's important that you do this, why it's important that you reveal that the government is doing this, and why it is wrong, no? Why the people must understand that if they are doing with somebody, and that the government always talk about the collateral damage of the drug war, you have to explain to people that it can be you, no? That without rules and with all this impunity, everybody is on risk, no? But yes, that is my advice, like create your networks and create your own collective of colleagues, and learn how to protect yourself and learn other things to do it better and to protect in community. The most important, or what is most effective, is the community protection. So you have to build this protection.
I think there were a couple of questions online, both about violence against women and importance of community building. And I think Marcela's answers have sort of addressed some of that. Let me go back to the room and request Ronson Chan to present his question.
Ronson, I'm so sorry to hear about how massive journalists were killed in Mexico. Just wanted to know that why the journalists are so easy to be targeted by the killers, because, well, if we do some investigative report, or we do so, we can maybe have some method to hide our identity, or even when the report launched, we may have some anonymous report on it. So just want to know why they can easily to target the journalists.
I think we lost your audio there for a second. So Marcela, just to place Ronson's question in brief, why is it so easy to identify these journalists, and is it better for them not to go by a byline in order to protect themselves? How come they get targeted so fast?
Why is too easy? Sometimes even journalists who didn't sign, they are okay. What we have done in Mexico, because we learn from Colombian journalists, is like many times you don't sign, or you don't sign your article, you maintain the anonymity. Sometimes we publish together the same information, many media at the same time. Sometimes we give to foreign correspondents the information because they can publish it. And so if they publish in an American newspaper, so we can say that New York Times published that maybe is your information, but you have to, yes, it's like a way to protect ourselves. We always try to, or not always, we try to collaborate or to do it in investigations with many media. But it's not easy for journalists who live in small towns where everybody knows who is the journalist there, no? Even if you don't sign, the people tell you that, you provide this information. Even if sometimes the journalist didn't do or didn't give information, but the drug cartels or the police think and suppose that it was the local journalist. And I don't know, the journalists are killed, many of them, when they are on their homes, in their houses, in front of the family or outside the family, or in the newsroom or in the street, in the daily routine. The journalists have been killed. So you cannot protect. We have a mechanism to protect journalists. And so you can call the government now and say, I am on risk. And these mechanisms have to help you. Sometimes they give you panic button, or they give you bodyguards, but it's not normal that they gave you bodyguard. But many times when they are analyzing if you are on risk or not, you can be killed. Or even with bodyguards, you can be killed. Or even with panic button, it's not always is working, or I don't know. So it's like really, really difficult. And many journalists, even if they are under threat, because in Mexico it's so normal to be under threat. It's normal. It's not yes. So you get used to live under threat, so you never know for what of all your information, or what of your many articles, why you receive the threat, for example. So I think we normalize living on fear, and we feel that we get used, and that is a really, really problem, that as we have been many years under threats, so you never know what or which one of these threats will be the one that will kill you. That has happened. In 2017, two of the most important investigative journalists were killed: Javier Valdez in Sinaloa and Miroslava Bridge in Chihuahua. And I think they live under threat so many years that they could not recognize when those were serious death threat. No? And for example, for that reason, I think that the emotional, be in contact with your emotions, and don't shoot off your own fear is important, because the fear is telling you that you have to do something. Sometimes you think, is it paranoid or is it true? It's not. You have to be in contact with your fear. You don't have to block it, because your fear can save your life. And it's important to have contact with this and with your colleagues that can sometimes notice something that you are not seeing, because you are always under this kind of stress and always in this environment that you cannot difference of these kind of threats, no? So.
What a dangerous and terrifying word this has become, Marcela, for journalists. Normal. I think that word does our community more harm than any other, where you continue to push the line so far back that you don't realize where it is that you've gotten to. We are completely out of time, but may I, on behalf of all of us at the Reuters community, express my gratitude for the time you've taken and really the honesty with which you've answered all our questions. Thank you very, very much. Please power on with your work. And I hope that there's an international community of journalists listening, and they certainly support the work that you do. Thank you, Marcela.
Thank you to you for this invitation, and I hope that you have a really good time in this experience that you are living now in the Reuters Institute.
Thank you indeed. And for everyone who's joined in, thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another seminar and another important face from the world of journalism.